All right, so let's go through some licks. First off, the tone I'm using in the video. This is my go-to Hendrix tone. It's basically a simulation of a classic Marshall amp, JTM 45 style. I've got on, in the solo you saw at the beginning, I have a fuzz face simulator on and a univibe. So those are the three effects. If you see my other Hendrix videos, I've gone into that in a little more depth, but that's the basic tone. But the focus of this lesson, what I want to talk about, is using chord shapes to come up with licks. So when you're playing a lick, the basic idea is you want to play notes that go over the chord that is playing on the backing track, right? So that can be difficult to do, but a really good trick is to understand, to be able to visualize the chords on the fretboard. And once you do that, it makes it a whole lot easier. So let me go through 3 licks, and for each one of those, I'll talk about the chord shapes in the background that I'm referencing to come up with these licks. So the chord progression is basically the same progression from Axis Bold as Love. We have A, we have E, and then we have F sharp minor, and then G. So that's the chords. So let's take a look at this first lick, and this is the first lick that I play in the solo. It goes something like this. Something like that, and that's really similar to the lick that Jimi Hendrix plays in the actual song. I made a couple modifications. But the important thing here to notice is the chords in the background. So without looking at the lick, let's look at the chords that I'm using as a reference point. So let's take this A, that's 7, 6, and 5 on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd string, that basic A chord. Then let's look at this E chord right here. That's basically a D shape, up 2 frets. That's an E chord. Let's look at F minor, which we'll play right there. So just the bottom 4 strings. That's 4, 2, 2, 2. And then the G chord is up here. I'll play this bar shape. So the 3rd fret on the 1st and 2nd string, 4 on the 3rd, 5th on the 4th. So let's use these chords as our reference points to come up with a lick here. So by the way, these, if you haven't heard this term before, these little chords, these 3-note chords, we call those triads. Triad meaning 3. There's each one of the degrees that are needed to make the chord are in the triad. So in the case of a major chord, it's the root, the major 3rd, and the 5th. It's just the 3 notes that are in the chord. Same thing with the E chord here. We have the 5th, the root, and the 3rd. And then if we just play the bar here on F sharp minor, we have the minor 3rd, the 5th, and the root on top. And then the G chord, we also have the G on top on the 1st string, the 5th there, and the major 3rd there. So basically all the notes that are in that chord, that make up that chord, we play those in a group of 3. We call that a triad. Really useful when we're trying to improvise here. So we're basically playing little small versions of these chords, and we're using these to help us write the lick. So let's analyze the lick now. So the first part of the lick goes like this. You'll notice that first note there, basically landing on the 6th fret on the 3rd string, that is the major 3rd of A. I'm just looking at that chord shape and I'm hitting a note in that chord shape. Then I hit the 5 on the second string. That's also in the A chord. And then I do this. And I land on this note right here. So the whole lick so far is this. Notice this note right here, the B, that is in that E chord. So that goes well with the E chord. Then we do this. So I mixed it up a little bit. In the Hendrix version, I think he just does this. And I did. So right there, that note right there, that's the F sharp. That goes over F sharp. So again, we just looked at this F sharp minor chord and we made sure to land on that when the F sharp chord came up. So this is a really easy concept. We're just moving from, think of it as moving from chord to chord rather than note to note or scale to scale or scale position to scale position. We're just moving between chords here, just like you would strum the song. So that goes with the F sharp minor. And then the next part of the lick is this. I do a little, slide up and down there. But look at this note now that I land on here. That's the G. That obviously goes to the G chord. So the skeleton of the lick, we're landing on this note, this note for the E chord. For the F sharp, we're landing on this, the F sharp, and on the G, we're landing on this. So this is a really useful tool when you are trying to figure out a lick or make up your own lick to go over a track. Go through that exercise, play the chords first, and then write a lick that just goes on top of those chords. That will make the lick sound way better because you're playing things that go with the backing track. That's really the key here. So that's it. So let's play through this lick one more time at a slow speed so you can hear it, how it sounds all together, and then we'll move on to the next lick. Okay, so let's get into lick 2 here. Lick 2, we're playing mostly the same chords, playing over the same chords is the first lick. We're using those same chord shapes as a reference. Again, the goal is we're using chord shapes as a reference to how to play a lick that makes sense. So in the last lick, we had A, E, and we used this shape here. And then we had F sharp and G. This one I'm making a little variation. Instead of just a normal A chord, I'm going to make this an A7 chord by adding a G note to it. Now this works particularly well because if you look at the chord progression, we have A, E, F sharp, and G. So that G note is very friendly to the licks we play here because it's in the chord progression. So it sounds really good when we throw in an A7 in place of the A. It works. So that's a variation on this lick here. The rest of the chord shapes we're using as a reference point in this lick are really the same. We have the same D-shaped chord for the E, right? That one right there. F sharp, minor, and G. Okay, so let's go through the lick a little bit and start to analyze it. So the lick goes like this. That's the first part of the lick. That first note that we slide up to, that is the third of A. That's in that A chord. 5/7 on the second string, and then we bend up that 7.5 step. There's that G note. That makes it an A7 type of sound. After we get to that, we land on this note, which is the B, also known as the fifth of the E chord here. There's our E shape. So now the next part of the lick, we're working our way up to the F sharp chord. So we're playing a lick basically in A major, in the A major scale, which this is basically an A major, A mixolydian progression. So this next part is just playing in the A scale, and we're working our way up to the F sharp. We already landed on the E at this point. And now we're working towards the F sharp minor. So that's the last part of the lick. So now this next part sounds like that. So 2/4 on the 4th string, 2/4 on the 3rd string, and then we do this little bend up half step, pull back, and pull off to the 2nd, land on the 4th string. So in this next part, this is where we're really emphasizing that F sharp minor chord. So notice this 1 slide up to 2. That's a little chromatic half step up. Notice this C note, that's not in the A major scale. It's not in the A major chord. That's the minor third of A. So it's not in the scale, so it's more of a leading tone into this note here, the C sharp, which you'll recognize as being in that F sharp minor shape, right? Because we got 4 on the 4th string, then 2, 2, 2 on the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st. So there's our emphasis on the F sharp minor. So next is the G chord. So after that slide up 1 to 2, then it's 2 on the 2nd, 4 on the 3rd. And then we do the same half step slide up, this time landing on the D note, the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And you'll notice that that note is in that G chord. That is the 5th of G. So the point in this second lick here is we use basically the same shapes that we did in the first lick. We're just hitting different notes in that scale. So in the first lick, we landed on the F sharp over the F sharp, and the G over the G. You remember it was something like this. So F sharp and G over the F sharp and G chord. In this one, we landed on the 5th of each of those respective chords, the C sharp and the D. So we use the same scale shapes, we just chose different notes, and it sounded good to play that after the first lick. We didn't want to play the same exact thing again, so we spiced it up a little bit and played a little bit higher up on each of those chords. So that's it. So that's the lick, and that's the concept. So let's play through this one slow, and we'll move on to the next lick. Here it is. Okay, last lick. So this one, we are playing with the same chord progression, obviously. It's the same chord progression throughout, but we're playing a little higher up on the register. We're playing an octave up. So in this one, let's use this shape for A. That's way up on the 14th fret. 14, 14, 14 on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd string. That's an octave up from your normal open A chord. So that's the shape we'll use for that. For the E, we have that same D shape we used. It's kind of in the same, it's in the same position. So that was what we used just an octave down in the first two licks. We're gonna play it on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd string though. Let's picture that as our chord. So it's basically 18 on the 4th string, 16 on the 3rd, and 17 on the 2nd. Then let's use the same shapes we use down here for F sharp and G, just an octave up. So same general chord shapes, a couple variations here, but in octave up. Again, the strategy is the same. We're taking a lick that we're using chords to make this lick work. So the first part of the lick is this. (14), that's obviously in the A chord, so we're landing on that. And we're really just filling out the notes in between the chords with the A major scale, really, as you'll notice throughout, because the A major scale is right here. A major pentatonic anyway, right? So I'm just pulling out notes from the A major scale to fill in between the notes where I'm landing on specific chords. So bend up half step on the 16, and then 17. Notice that this, going from the 17 to the 14, that 14 note there, those two notes work really well over the E chord. So now we're approaching to the F sharp. Let's go up 14, 16 on the 4th and 3rd string. Basic little blues lick there, but paying attention to those notes. That 16 that we end on at the end of that little phrase, that is the F sharp. Works very well over the F sharp. Then the last part of the lick, 14, 16 on the 3rd string. That 16, that goes well over the G. And so that's basically our G target there. So that's the lick. I'll play it through one more time, but again, just to recap the point of this lesson, when you're writing a lick, step one, look at the chords that are being played on the backing track in the background. Play those chords through a few times in the shapes that you prefer, wherever on the fretboard you prefer, and then write a lick that uses those notes from each of those chord shapes. And what you'll find is that, first off, you're going to be able to visualize the correct notes to play much more easy, because if you know your chord shapes well enough, then it's a great roadmap for that. And if you can't quite picture them yet, it's still a excellent tool if you're writing out a lick methodically and you really want to plan it out. it's a great tool to use. Learn those chord shapes and then write the lick based on that, you know. Yeah, you'll find that your licks will sound way better using this approach than just picking a scale and just playing notes. It makes you a much more intelligent guitar player. It makes you much more aware of what you're playing over, and you know, focus on really getting licks to make sense with the song that you're playing with. So great strategy, highly recommended. I hope that you take away some very valuable things from this lesson. So that's it. Let's play through this lick one more time at a slow speed. Yeah, up 1 fret.